You know, if I wanted people to find me agreeable, this was probably the wrong video to make.
Ozzy!
Persona 5 Royal has been out for nearly 2 months in the West as of now, and it's already been getting high praise from everywhere that isn't Reset Era. It's a phenomenal experience and definitely a high recommendation from me if you're looking for a great JRPG to sink your teeth into. With most RPGs though, the forefront of gameplay is often the dungeon crawling experience, and while Persona is relatively unique in how it balances its gameplay loop as both a social simulator and dungeon crawler, the latter is definitely an integral aspect that leaves a clear impression on players. So why not rank those dungeons while we're here, huh? That's literally why you clicked on the video. I've got my pal Seniors here to share their thoughts as well, so we'll be alternating a tad in order to give some variety and perspective. Say hi to the camera.
Why do I keep agreeing to these videos?
Because it's the only way for you to deal with the pain. Anyways, there will obviously be spoilers for P5R from this point on, so you've been warned. Screw the formalities though, let's jump right into this. Well, I can't actually jump because I'm a stick figure who has no legs drawn, but oh gosh, I can hear the pitchforks already.
But what about Okumura?
Hear me out a tad, alright? Because the fact that this is the worst palace in the game, in my opinion, is probably the biggest compliment I can give to Royal's overall quality.
One number in and you're already wrong.
Listen, I like it a lot, I just...
Nope, you're bad. Just accept it.
Don't make me get the measuring tape again.
The what?
Futaba's Pyramid of Wrath is a definite narrative gem. Taking a few pointers from Persona 4's character arcs, Futaba's trauma from her mother's passing is tragically memorable. This torment she experiences, though fantastical due to the nature of the story, feels incredibly real and impactful. The arc also starts off with a really interesting twang, setting up the premise of a purely anonymous threat to the thieves in the form of Medjed, only for a bashful hacker to swoop in and blackmail you into stealing the heart of Futaba Sakura. The twist itself is somewhat obvious, but it sets up her character in a pretty clever way and only adds to that impact when she finally embraces the truth and rebels against her mother's cognitive sphinx demon. The Pyramid's look is definitely memorable and gorgeous, if not growing a little repetitive towards the end. Though Days When Mother Was There is a masterpiece of a song and will likely keep your focus in place. Honestly, the only reason this is in last for me is that this is by far the least changed palace in the game. Aside from 1 or 2 added grapple spots for skipping areas, as well as the expected will seeds and subtle layout changes, this palace feels nearly identical to its counterpart in the prior game, even down to the boss fight, which is slightly better but not much to write home about. Now, this fact doesn't inherently make a palace bad, and this palace is hardly one I'd even call bad, but it definitely makes it feel somewhat dated compared to the rest, leaving it in my bottom spot. So yeah, please don't kill me. Expect a more in-depth video about this soon, but surprise! This is no longer my least favorite palace. I definitely wasn't expecting that. To make a long story short, this palace has been improved in every way.
What about the boss fight?
In every way.
But what about the boss?
In every way! Before I get into that mini rant, I'll get everything else out of the way. This palace is definitely still flawed, especially from a narrative standpoint, and while its initial payoff is still lacking, I feel like the subtle changes to the preceding arc's epilogue make the plot flow way better. Morgana's insecurity now feels not only justified, but definitely impactful, and it truly feels like both him and Ryuji were in the wrong here. Haru still gets her spotlight stolen by the other thieves, as you'd expect from, well, thieves.
I get it.
Though I still feel that her shining moments are worth appreciating here, and she at least has plenty more moments afterwards to give her the appreciation she deserves. But why is this not in last, you may be wondering?
Because you're stupid?
What? Okay, maybe. But also because the gameplay has been completely overhauled, making the palace run itself not just bearable, but fun. The Corpobots now sell out the weaknesses of their higher-ups, which is entertaining, and the process of fighting them has been streamlined to an insane degree. The rest of the palace has plenty of smaller changes that only insane people like me would notice, but the biggest thing that helps the flow of the palace is that Royal is just a better, more balanced game now. With so many combat and exploration options at your disposal, SP is no longer an issue, nor is your sanity being ripped away, and I couldn't help but genuinely enjoy myself the entire time. Yes! Including the boss fight. I'll save this topic for another video, but to put it simply, Okumura's new fight isn't broken, nor is it unfair, random, nor terrible. In fact, it's genuinely one of my favorite fights in the game when I actually came to understand it, and even though I was underleveled, whilst playing on hard, and hadn't prepared at all, it was a blast with every attempt until I finally took him down. The space aesthetic is still hit or miss, and Sweatshop can get a little tiresome, but with how much this palace has been revamped to be shorter and just overall better, I genuinely really enjoy this palace now. Top 10 anime redemption arcs, let's go!
Is it my turn now?
Yeah, do your thing.
Whoa! Madarame's Palace is probably the one I hear talked about the least, which is a shame because just like the rest of the game, it's really freaking good. I'd say that this is one of the palaces that nails its theme the best. It really feels like a museum heist in every way. In the gameplay department, we got laser mazes and security rooms all over the place that really help give this palace a really sneaky vibe. I'd say this was the part of the game where I felt the most like a thief, disabling security systems and running into an embarrassing amount of lasers because I'm impatient. There's also the painting puzzle that I got lost in for an embarrassingly long time, and then it's all capped off with a very improved boss fight against Madarame. In P5 Vanilla, the boss was by far the biggest difficulty spike in the game, and at least in my opinion, you won't find a spike like that in Royal until literally the final boss. But now it's way easier and way more interesting. Meanwhile, over in The Plot, Joker and the gang are trying to get information out of the eccentric artist and Madarame's student, Yusuke, which leads to one of my favorite lines in the game.
What?
I guess the only way is having you go nude.
What?
Which, also, this isn't tone deaf or poorly written, but that's a whole nother can of worms that I'll be talking about for another 20 minutes if I don't stop now. Anyway, Yusuke gets dragged into the palace and has the second awakening in the game right behind Joker's. Then at the end, we learn the true story behind the Sayuri, which is just such a great twist. And I think that's by far the best part of this palace, Yusuke's arc. His whole story is tragic, and it's so amazing to see Yusuke be able to learn the truth behind all of Madarame's lies. And it's done in such a way that feels so personal. I just really like Yusuke, okay? Also, this palace is pretty and the music is nice. And yeah, that's it. Y'all should talk about this palace more. It's pretty good. Ozzy, you know people don't consider this an actual palace, right?
Shut up, I like this one. And yes, it is a palace, so I'm including it. Mementos comprises a third of Persona 5's main gameplay, and while I always generally enjoyed it in Vanilla P5, it felt mostly like a formality at the end of the day. Royal runs over that sentiment with a bus. Mementos is not only massively improved in Royal, but I'm genuinely excited for every trip I plan. All of the new features just amplify the experience of every Mementos visit, from Jose's inclusion, which adds buffing stamps and flowers that can grant you rare items when gathered up, or the revamps to Ryuji's insta-kill ability, which, well, runs over most shadows in your path. There are new specialized floor layouts and random floor alterations that add a clear risk versus reward dynamic, new Mementos bosses, constantly evolving music, and tons of small details that just keep you engaged throughout. Obviously, there isn't much blatant story relevance until the end of the game, but when it does kick in, especially in regards to the new floors of Mementos added in third semester, it just feels that much more memorable and special. Also, the transition between Mementos and its depths is much less drastic now, so depths actually feels like a direct extension of the whole Mementos. Not the biggest deal, but a nice touch in my opinion. Mementos may not be the average palace, but it's definitely a core part of the game that I officially love, and that slots it into 7th place for me. Kaneshiro's bank has always felt like an underrated diamond in terms of palaces, and honestly might have some of my favorite core gameplay for any of the palaces. Price is a total banger of palace theme, and the aesthetic is utterly gorgeous, even adding some new and refreshing portions in Royal that amplify the atmosphere and gameplay even more. From gold-plated walls to swinging over an ocean of cash to get a will seed, and just... man, this one deserves way more credit. That's not even mentioning Makoto's story relevance, where her desire to finally be useful to those around her only serves to have her belittled and shoved down by society's reins even more, until she finally smashes through her inner prison and develops into the true brains of the Phantom Thieves. Kaneshiro's gluttonous hoarding of cash is no use for the Council Prez at wit's end. Even though the plot isn't one of the best, it's certainly fantastic, and this probably serves as the game's most optimal core example of a standard palace working its magic. Oh, and the new boss fight is also pretty engaging, and while I'm still deciding if I prefer the old or new one, I can't say it doesn't have variety.
Unlike your content.
Don't make me shoot on again.
No! Thinks you just shoot on multiple times across multiple videos. Maybe I'll shoot the entire Toradora cast, see how he likes it. What were we talking about? Oh, yeah. If I had to pick one palace in this game to call the most underrated, I would have to go with Mementos Depths. Now, I'll admit, on the gameplay side, this is one of the weaker palaces. For the majority of this palace, you're mostly being funneled down straight pathways with the occasional very obvious chest that you can grab with the grappling hook. I think it's also pretty noticeable that this is the only palace in Royal that doesn't have will seeds, which makes sense with this being the palace of the public, but it's still a bit of a letdown. The floor light puzzles are also kinda lame and as far as I can tell have no symbolism at all. So why is this at number 5, you may ask?
I didn't ask that.
Shut up. Well, that's because the plot is really freaking good. I would argue that every palace continues to get more and more climactic as the game goes on, and this is no exception. Everything leading up to this palace just adds tension to this as the final arc. The lack of a public response to Shido's change of heart, the looming threat of legal action against the Phantom Thieves, Igor's increasingly suspicious behavior, it all builds to truly feel like the final mission of the Phantom Thieves, even if it's not. And it only gets better when we enter the Quiplash, Cliffith world.
Clifford.
Whatever that means. And face off against the coolest boss in the entire Persona series, and I will stand by that claim until the day I die, or at least until Persona 6 comes out and now does this. Also, you can argue that the fan site hitting 100% is cheesy and cliche, but I don't care. It's amazing, and it gives me goosebumps every time.
What the frick was that?
Sorry, I got excited. It's pretty uncommon for a JRPG, or any game for that matter, to have a very large portion of the fanbase say that their favorite part of the game is the tutorial dungeon. But if you've played P5, which if you've gotten this far into the video, I'm going to assume you have, then you know why this palace is so widely beloved. The design of this palace is fantastic. The tutorial is worked into the story in a way that doesn't make it feel annoying or hand-holdy. And after Best Girl joins the team, the game opens up to you in almost every way, letting the player use their newfound knowledge to go about the dungeon in any way they please. It's not punishing to new players who are still learning the game, but it's also rewarding to those who know what to do and how to manage their time. Also, while we're still on the topic of gameplay, I want to mention the boss fight. It's actually one of the more changed fights in the game, with a whole new phase which introduces us to Cognitive, Mishima, and Shiho. This is a great addition, not only because it makes the fight more fun, but also because I always found it strange that Shiho didn't have a cognition. She's clearly someone that's on Kamoshida's mind a lot, for the worst possible reasons, so it makes sense for her to have a cognition in the palace. In terms of the plot, oh god, it hurts! Despite this being the first arc of the game, they pull no punches with making you feel pain. Lives are ruined, dreams are crushed, athletes are abused, and the blondes cry. It's also effective because of how amazing the villain is. Kamoshida is such an effective villain because he feels so real. Plagiarizing artists and greedy mob bosses are obviously evil, but it can feel hard to see it in a real-world context. Not because it doesn't happen, but because most people don't interact with those types of people. But everyone has interacted with a gym teacher or a crooked adult, and because of that, it's much easier to conceptualize this guy being real. Only other thing I really have to say about this one is that An and Ryuji are the best characters in the game, and they especially get to shine here. Everything they do in this palace is amazing and super memorable. Also, the music's quite nice. Also, I don't know if I've mentioned it yet, but I really like An.
Senor, stop.
You can't stop me! You can shoot on, but there's no way you can stop me from talking about her.
What if I played the next slide?
Wait, what?
Ah, yes. My personal pick for the best palace in Vanilla P5. It's a clear staple of quality for this game, and most of what I can say is within my 40-minute analysis. So, is it still the best? No. All jokes aside, this palace is still phenomenal, from its gripping story and narrative climax to its gameplay which tests players in ways hardly seen in earlier palaces. The slight downside here is that it's not changed all that much aside from cutting down the fat a tad, which only ends up making it even shorter at the end of the day. Regardless, the layout was already masterful, and some aspects from before have been rebalanced slightly, so it didn't need much revamping to reach 3rd place. After all, it still has Whims of Fate. What did you expect? Her new boss fight also gives a little more variety, implementing an elemental wheel to keep things interesting. And while it's still one of the more basic boss fights, its new flair is appreciated. My only real critique is that I feel like Kasumi's presence while escaping feels a little too forced and unnatural, but there weren't many ways to pace it better without revamping that entire segment, so I'll give it a pass.
That just sounds like personal bias.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay then. Alright, quick bit of clarification before I get into this one. So, when creating this video, me and Ozzy made our own personal lists of our palace rankings. After that, Ozzy mixed the two lists together to make a list that represented both of us. The reason I bring this up is because on my personal list, Shido was my favorite palace in the game, because, oh, it's good! Alright, let's get some minor things out of the way. Arc is an amazing palace theme, and nobody talks about it for some reason, even though it's one of the best songs in the game. The palace is gorgeous. Everywhere you look, there is something visually striking to see. The symbolism is some of the best in the game. You have the giant ships sailing through a destroyed Japan like Noah's Ark, if Noah's Ark was in Japan and was exclusively reserved for cartoonishly posh douchebags. Along with that, there are the posters that look like propaganda for a tyrant, which contrast perfectly with the campaign posters that can be seen around the city. And of course, there are the giant megaphones that are blaring his speeches all across the ship. As for the gameplay, Joker and the gang need to find 5 layers of recommendation, each of which lets all the members of the team shine in ways that only they can. There are also the rat mazes. I never personally found any of these to be annoying. In fact, I quite liked them, but many others didn't, so they were streamlined in a way that makes them less tedious, but still a fun challenge. We also have...
Eat the cheese, eat the cheese, eat the cheese!
What the hell are you doing?
Eat the cheese!
Ah! Yes, they also added cheese that restores a small amount of HP and SP to the rat mazes, which is shown to the player in one of the funniest scenes in the game. This adds way more than it may seem because it gives the player more of a choice. Do you want to just run through and get to the end, or do you want to do a bit more puzzle solving to get some HP and SP back? Meanwhile, over in Plotland, everything that the thieves have done has led up to this. All of our party members have a potential stake in this, most of all Red, who is finally going to be able to enact his justice on the man that ruined not only his life, but the lives of countless others. All the while, more and more of Shido's misdeeds are being revealed to us. Also, Goro is here. Remember him? This confrontation was already a major highlight of the original game, but it's even more impactful and royal thanks to Akechi's revamped confidant. Honestly, my only real complaint with this palace is that they didn't change the part after Ryuji saves everyone, and then they all beat him up. Like, why would you do that to him? Fuck you guys! Even then, that's more of a nitpick than anything. Honestly, I probably would have agreed with Ozzy's #1 pick, but there was one thing that pushed this over the top for me, that being the boss fight. Now, for most of the fight, it seems mostly the same, but then... Oh! Okay! Everything about this fight is so perfect. a one-on-one with the man that ruined Ren's life. Shido is throwing everything he has at us as blue fire surrounds us, which is keeping our teammates from helping us. All the while, Rivers in the Desert is playing for the first time in all its glory. It's all so good that I'm honestly slightly in disbelief that it actually happened. So yeah, I kinda like this palace. Alright, now for number 1, it's Ozzy's turn to go off.
To anyone who has played Royal, this was pretty obvious, I'm not gonna lie. Where do I even start with this? I guess we go to the core of it all. Takuto Maruki, a snack-granting therapist with morality so gray that the antagonist blatantly parallels Joker with every conversation and fight. From him having a second awakening of massive proportions, the way he reaches out to the sky at the moment of seeming defeat, and just his desires to liberate others from their worries by his own hand with little to no selfish gain. Maruki is an antagonist, but even if you disagree with him, he's no villain. His intent is purely selfless, and this is simply a direct conflict of ideals. His story arc is phenomenal, especially with the inclusion of Samire's traumatic struggles, as well as Akechi's seeming revival into this snarky piece of crap that he's perfect!
Ozzy, I think you're gay.
No, these boys make me feel things, and—
I'll give Ozzy a week before he realizes he's into dudes.
No, I'm not into— No! The palace itself is a clear peak in this game's design, and it's more evident than ever that they fully mastered how to make an engaging and meaningful dungeon. Each puzzle leaves its own impact, my two favorites being the Quiz of Mental Wellness and the Color Maze, which, listen, if I've noticed one trend, it's that 99% of Persona fans hate mazes in their games, and all I can honestly say is, this is the best one, so if you dislike it, there's a chance you might just be bad at mazes. I also just adore how they tie palace progression to your understanding of Maruki. Each historical videotape holding clues to his mental safeguards, and while that's mainly just a narrative device being thrust upon you, it works so well. The palace also sports this slick white design with blue and gold highlights, and it constantly evolves to better explore the blue and gold shades for their own dedicated segments. And oh, small note, but Maruki's Garden of Eden is the most gorgeous locale in the series by far. I could probably go on for hours and hours venting on my adoration for this arc and all of its involved characters, having not even mentioned all of the third semester editions, or all the new music like Gentle Madman or Out of Kindness, and especially Throw Away Your Mask and I Believe, that all add this intensely somber piano, or any of those insane boss fights, like that checkmate moment and the fist fight. It's really good, okay?
I prefer Shido's palace.
How does it feel to be wrong?
That's your perspective.
Yeah, for all we know, you're just— Wait, who's that behind you?
Huh? Oh, that's On. You know, from that Persona video game I like.
Didn't she already die?
What? No, she... Wait. Ozzy, what'd you wish for?
Nothing really, except to actually be funny.
Oh, well, no shift in reality can fix that.
I wish On never existed.
Ozzy, don't!
Well, that's the video done. I may have accidentally broken the universe at the end there, but it was definitely worth it. No clue where Michelle went, though.
Ah!
Well, there they are. They'll be fine, no worries.
You suck.
Yeah. If you're watching this, subscribe to Seniorish's channel, linked in the description. They're getting into the groove of making more videos, and in my opinion, they're a way more natural entertainer than I am, so I hope you enjoy.
I promise I'm actually making stuff.
Ooh, and before I forget, I'll leave up both of our individual lists for the palaces in case you guys were curious, since this was a collaborative effort, and we're not exactly a hive mind.
My list is better.
Says the Toko fan.
Okay, now you've gone too far.
Oh, and as cliche as this is, make sure to like and share the video if you enjoyed it. It genuinely helps a ton. Plus, I've got plenty more content like this and lots more on the way as well, so subscribe, why don't you? If you want to follow what I'm up to, there's always the community tab here on YouTube, where I'm pretty active, and even more so you can find me active on Twitter and on my Discord server, both linked in the description as well. Special thanks to Seniors, of course, as well as Meloichi for helping make the thumbnail and for just being awesome. I'll also throw his Twitter below because he's the best. Oh, and while you're here, feel free to comment your personal rankings of the palaces. My word isn't law, and I love seeing all your differing opinions across the board. After all, I definitely irked a few Futaba fans and Okumura haters, so I can't wait to get a wider consensus. So yeah, that's about all I have to say now. Stay safe, keep out of trouble, and show your waifus. It's important.
Whoa, he's out! Yeah, that was really rude. She did nothing wrong.
Hey, listen, I brought her back for the end gag, alright? No need to get on my case.
I guess. But that's the only thing you wished for, right?
Yes?
What the shit? Ah!